I mean, most people who live in Barbados don't know what Janet is.
Correct.
Have not experienced it. And those who experience it are so old that, it's probably a fading memory. Compare that to Dominica, for example. It's a completely different experience. And because of the impact of global warming, it appears that these systems are becoming significantly more powerful, far more unpredictable, and doing things that they never did before. We are seeing systems move from category 1 to 5 practically overnight. I mean, the system that you referenced the other day, the very minor system.
Yeah.
People went to sleep expecting it was going to be just a normal night, and you woke up the next day with 100 houses damaged. This is the kind of world in which we live in. And and our key point, which I want to re-emphasize over and over, is that what we did for the last 20, 30, 40 years cannot be acceptable for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Things have changed dramatically, and we need to have commensurate changes in our hurricane preparedness systems for Barbados.
Well, let's look then at our public infrastructure, our roads, potable water systems, electricity supply. And with the system a week ago, some areas lost power in some instances for up to 3 days.
Circumstances where you can order equipment, order supplies, and actually plan the repairs. Consider the difficulty of doing it when there's no electricity, there's no running water, everything is a mess, there's no communication, the phone is not working, and you're trying to rebuild your basic infrastructure. This is something that we need to think about now, while we can make sensible plans and not leave it till the day after the storm, when you can't even talk to one another. And this is the point we actually trying to drive home from BAP.
But how do you make those systems more resilient?
With creative planning. This is something that has to be done way in advance. So this is what worries us. This is not something we can do in May because the system is starting, because the hurricane season starts in June. This is something we have to plan now for 5, 10, 15 years down the road. It's something we should have started 5 years ago for now. We didn't. And this is why we are always talking about the building code. A building code is a really special piece of legislation. Basically, it establishes minimum standards, taking into consideration the potential threats. This is just what we're talking about. If we know we live in a region where you can experience winds of 150 miles per hour, it behooves you up front to spend a few extra dollars to build a home that will stand up after such an experience, rather than save those dollars and then every 5 or 10 years you have to build that home over and over and over again, possibly losing lives in the process, having serious injuries, incurring significant hospital costs because of damage, loss of possessions, and all the other things that can accrue from not having a solid envelope as a home or as a protective area. So basically, there are 4 main phases of disaster preparedness. And the very first one is called mitigation. And mitigation is what I like to call common sense. It is way upfront planning. And this is the answer to your question, how you deal with protecting your infrastructure, for example. Take the electricity system. The electricity system is fundamental to almost everything that we do in Barbados. It is actually the energy of the country. It is what powers everything that we do. Our electricity system is largely exposed to the weather by poles that we have stuck all. Now, this worked well for us for a century, but this is 2030. And for years now, we knew that the system would be far more resilient if it resided underground.
Underground, yeah.
Of course, it's also far more expensive. So if you make your decisions based on short-term return on investment, you will continue to put poles up because it's about 1/10 of the cost. But in the long run, if you understand risk management and you understand the risks you're taking by having your whole infrastructure exposed, it may make sense on an annual basis, for example, to move 5% of the system underground, 5% next year. And every year you actually reduce your exposure without incurring the full capital cost, which we agree is higher than. But we have not been doing anything like that. That requires a long-term national plan so that we could say, for example, that 20 years from now, we will move to a situation where 50% is underground. So we know even after a storm, half of the island, click, and you're back on. And then we can start building from there. We are in a position now where 20, 30, 40 years after we recognize the value of going underground, we're still 90%. We have not been moving in a positive direction. Now that is a lack of vision. And that is the kind of concern that we have at BAP. We're not saying that tomorrow we should find $2 billion to move everything underground. We know that that's not practical. But what we need is a plan that says that by 2040, 60% will be underground. And to do that, we will put 5, 10, 15, 20, so that we all know where we're going. And if something happens in the meantime, you understand you're still exposed, but to a lesser degree, because you would have made some conversion, made some movement in the right direction. This is the kind of mitigation that we would like to see in place. It calls for national planning. It calls for legislation that establishes minimum, so that you don't let people go around building houses that will blow down because somebody puffed, which is essentially what happened the other night. In comparison to what could happen in 2021 with the kind of systems we are seeing, that was a puff. And if a puff is going to cause that kind of damage, Lord help us if we get unlucky in any particular year.
So I want to go back to the building code in just a second, but I know that in your statement, and I did mention, you're concerned about the state of our roads.
Right. We are very concerned about the roads. We are very concerned about the bridges. We are very concerned about drainage. And not to pick on the roads, but the roads has, this have been a special bane to us at BAP. We actually had a number of seminars to deal with the whole question of managing potholes, for example, the whole question of transportation, the congestion on the roads, the apparent lack of planning. I mean, the situation where there's just a drizzle and pedestrians cannot walk the road in peace without having to wade through puddles of water, splashed up by vehicles. I mean, the truth is, in 2021, this should not be the case in a country that, like Barbados, where we have invested the kind of resources in education and in human resource development. When I qualified, I could pick any job I wanted. That was the honest truth. Our problem then was lack of engineering resources, people who were trained to solve problems. I can tell you now, right, that we have in Barbados between 600 to 800 people fully qualified to be engineers who are not being utilized as engineers. Well, if we were to talk about that, that'd be a whole other subject. So let's stick to disaster preparedness. But it is not for lack of resources, for human resources. We have people, we have expertise, we have people who we spent lots of resources to train. What we have not put in place is the systems to utilize these talents to make our systems work. That is what is missing.
You mentioned concerns about our drainage system as well.
Same as the roads, right? So again, and I measure by results. We measure by results. As engineers go by the results you get. And you just need a couple inches of rain, suddenly flooding. Same places flooding over and over and over. The truth is it is not that complicated to put things in place to solve it. And if you were to talk to the civil and the structural engineers and the people who are actually the drainage engineers, I can give you a whole list of people who can give you the needed solutions off the cuff and show you how it can be financed and how it can be implemented. For some reason, we continue to have the same problems over and over with the roads, with drainage, with so many problems that need to be solved.
You mentioned the importance of the National Building Code, something I know the BAP has been pushing for since the 80s. Do you have suggestions on the table so far?
Let me begin preparations. It's hurricane season. Let me sit down and reason. Let me secure a nation. Know your shelters, Bajan. Help out one another against vibration. Develop emergency community plans so that we could function. Remove.
All right. Ground that possibly should be underground, what we can expect in terms of intensity of systems as a result of global warming. It's real. So when we talk about this climate change, it is real, and we're seeing the impact of it. And to have you back with
Good
me
morning,
today.
everyone. Yes, I was a bit busy, so I'm sorry I was trying to get here a little earlier.
That's all right. You're here now, so we're going to focus on that. And, during our broadcast last week, we had a quick chat, but I wanted to have a chance to talk with you a little more because, as you know, during the course of this year, since we started this program, we have been making time to talk about mental health matters. So today, certainly, I thought it would be fitting as we look at moving forward better after the storm. Many people, though our situation, we haven't had any loss of life here in Barbados, but it did happen in some Caribbean islands when Elsa passed through St. Lucia. We saw all the flooding and other devastation in Jamaica. So I wanted you to focus on mental health here and what we need to be thinking of, how we need to think of every member of the family who could be impacted and what they might be going through. How do you really kind of pick up the pieces after going through any sudden devastation?
Okay. Well, of course, we have been through it for the last year and some.
Yes.
And I think Hurricane Elsa was, for a lot of persons, the straw that brought the camel's back, because we have been through COVID, which we're still going through the pandemic. We've had the eruption of La Soufrière volcano and the trauma that comes with that and the cleanup. We have persons who are still without work because of the pandemic, because of the asphalt, businesses that have closed down, and then businesses that have built back up. And then a hurricane blew through and damaged their properties that they could not, that I'm sure some of them are saying, we really can't afford to fix this now.
Yeah.
And it has been, everybody has been touched in some way and in different ways. That's the one thing. So one thing that we have to understand when it comes to trauma is that everybody's reaction to a traumatic event is going to be different based on your genetics. So some people are just built differently. Some persons can handle a lot more than other persons. And then there are also other factors, so previous traumatic events. So I think all of us now fall under the category of being through traumatic events, pandemic, volcano eruption, plus a hurricane. And other things that may have happened in individuals' past, whether that is the loss of relatives before, loss of job, changing relationships, stress with finances, all those things. So the important thing to note when it comes to mental health as well is that it is important at each stage of life. So from children straight up to the geriatric stage. So children, adolescents, adults, the elderly. So in children, you are going, because COVID has really brought the mental health of children to the forefront, both privately and publicly. Because I think that before, a lot of the general public didn't really consider the mental health of children. We just thought, children are supposed to be happy, children are supposed to play, they go to school, we provide for them, they don't have anything to worry about. Of course, that's for the average child. We know that there are children who've had pretty traumatic lives thus far, even at early stages with abuse or loss of parents and different financial or socioeconomic hardships and stuff. But the average child has been affected by COVID. They have not been able to socialize with their friends as they normally would. So the child that grows up in an extended family home has a bit of a benefit because you have cousins and everybody. But when you are the only child or one of two, when you live in an area where there are not many other children around you, school was where you got to socialize with your friends. And just as some children were about to go back to school, then school, this week is usually the fun week at school because you don't have much. You don't do much work. You just get to come to school, socialize with your friends and stuff. and they're not going back to school. A lot of children anticipated going to school. They're probably just going tomorrow. Some of them for the last day. So exactly, some children, every child isn't going. So everything for them continues to be disrupted. So you have to know your child. So if you start with children, you have to know your child. So you can talk. The important thing I would like to stress is that you need, no matter how small the child is or how big the child is, you need to talk to your child about what is going on and ask them. So obviously what you'd say to a 4-year-old is going to be different to how you explain it to a 14-year-old. So the 4-year-old, you would have hopefully during Elsa spoken about the rain and that it's a storm, it's a hurricane, and look at the trees swaying and stuff. And the adolescent would understand a bit more.
Yes.
And ask them how they're feeling, because a lot of people don't do that. They don't ask the child, how are you feeling about this? What do you understand has happened, so that you as a parent or the guardian can dispel any misconceptions that they may have had about what has happened, because a lot of them would have never gone through something like this.
Yes.
A lot of us have never gone through something like this. So just help them understand that, it's a natural event. It happens. Sometimes it's time to educate them about the hurricane season. This is a good geography or social studies, integrated science lesson as well that you can teach your children. Of course, it requires you to do some research as well as a parent.
Yeah.
But look out for any behavioral changes in your child. So whether that is they're acting out a bit more or they're a bit more rude, changes in their appetite, anything like that. Because you know your child better than I would. And if you feel like it is more than is expected, because it's expected that there may be changes after traumatic events such as these. If you think that it's more than that, then you can start with either your pediatrician. Just bring it to attention to your children. You have to check in, not just with the children, with each other, in terms of the family, the adults, checking in with each other, because a lot of people have been conditioned to just push through. Right? And we don't take the time to really listen and find out, how are you really coping with this? And even the elderly, because that could actually make a huge difference.
Absolutely. What about those who have had to be moved to shelters or to another relative's home? That might be difficult for them too, though I'm sure they're grateful. That might be difficult too.
That is extremely difficult, and my heart goes out to anybody whose house was damaged, especially damaged to the point that you are not able to live in your own home. And also, I just want to say thank you as a Barbadian and as a human being to any of the family members or friends that have taken in any person who's been displaced, any of the potential landlords that will agree to allow families to stay in their apartments, under the care of the government. And thank you to all of the workers in the disaster committee everything who've been working so hard. It is difficult to be displaced. It's very difficult. Some persons may have it easier than others because they may have slotted right into a relative's home who had the space and does not mind you being there, but we all know that everybody prefers to be in their own space. So it is very hard, very, very hard. And I just want everyone who is displaced I want to acknowledge the fact that it's hard. I want you, as speaking to them, you need to acknowledge that it is hard and give yourself some sympathy. Because we are usually very quick to give sympathy, taking you to another step, to another step, to another step, rather than jumping 20 steps ahead and worrying about 2 months from now. Even though that's a normal thing for our brains to do, it doesn't help the situation.
You're absolutely right. Well said. We're going to pause here and we'll come back to our conversation, Dr. Ford. We're going to talk some more about those steps and what help is available in Barbados so that you can take care of your mental health. We'll be right back. We're back with you now and chatting with Dr. Keo Ford St. Hill. She is a psychiatrist and she's been advising, giving some really good advice on, helping us pick up the pieces and move forward one little step at a time. If you look at the task as completely mammoth, it's going to be that way and it will be overwhelming. It's probably overwhelming just looking at all the little moving parts. So what you cannot control, as we were going to break, what you have no control over, it will not make a lot of sense and it will not help you to move to the next stage if you just worry about that. So we're going to look at the information you need to get you to the next point. So Dr. Ford, let's talk some more about these steps. And as we were taking the break, you were talking about that, figuring it out, building yourself up and deciding, okay, well, this is where I am, and this is what I need to do to move myself beyond this point. So let's talk about that.
So before the break, we were saying take everything step by step, because you're correct. If you look at the whole task, you're going to become very overwhelmed. Breaking it down bit by bit makes things a little easier to manage with. So that's one thing. The other thing is to share the load and make sure that you do it as a family. If you live on your own and you've been displaced, then you might say, well, it's just me that has to deal with it. But your other family members might actually they might not be able to put you up, but they might be able to go with you to appointments. They may be able to make phone calls on your behalf. So reach out and do things as a family in terms of taking those steps. The other thing when you've been displaced is to try as much as possible, even if you have to create a new routine or try to get back to what you knew as your routine before as a family. So to do activities together, still make sure that everybody gets sleep. I know sleep might be difficult for some because of what they would have gone through, and that is perfectly normal. But try as much as possible to still get sleep as you can. Make sure that you're still getting your meals. Make sure that the children are still doing activities that they would have done before you go to work, if you can, as normal, doing as much as you can to get back to any semblance of normalcy actually really, really helps you to get through the process.
So and some kind of routine.
Just some kind of routine, and still include fun activities for everybody, whether it is, playing catch outside, dodge ball, piggy in the middle, something like that to get, to one, be fun, and two, getting some exercise.
That's important. And yes, you need to do those things to relax your mind, because again, it's a lot. When people think, well, whatever it is, I worked so hard to get this, to get here, and I saw people crying and holding their heads, trying to, I could only imagine, figure out, well, what will I do next? But like you said, you got to call the agencies that you need to call to
your GP for your children, the pediatrician. So if it's the doctor at the polyclinic or even the nurse at the polyclinic, when you go, you explain to the nurse how you are feeling, and we actually, the psychiatric hospital actually has mental health clinics in each polyclinic.
Okay.
So you can actually be referred to see one of the community psychiatrists, and we have community mental. Okay. So you can walk in, you don't need appointments. And then there's also, you can actually go to the accident emergency department at QEH, and you can be referred to their psychiatry department there, because they have psychiatrists on call at QEH every day as well. And they do see patients as outpatients as well as inpatients if it comes to that.
Okay.
And the Barbados Psychological Association or Society, so basically the Association for Psychologists in Barbados, actually has a really good Facebook page. I don't have the exact name on me right now, but you can just search for Barbados Psychologists in Facebook. And they actually have a list of all of their members and what their specialties are. So whether it's trauma, children, family counseling, all those things, and the contact information for for each of the psychologists, and you can actually make an appointment to see them as well.
Excellent. I want you to give persons an understanding. Say you're just feeling a bit overwhelmed, you're feeling heavy, and you want someone to talk to just to help you understand how to cut through, to get motivated, to move yourself out of what could become a rut because of this situation, whatever situation of loss. Give us an idea of what the process is like to help people understand. And these things happen sometimes at inopportune times.
Anything, if you ask them for advice, they can give you, but that's one of the first steps. If it is beyond that, you're having difficulty sleeping, you feel so overwhelmed that you're having thoughts of harming yourself or ending it all, or just not managing with life right now, which is understandable with quite a person. Remember that you can walk into psychiatric hospital or to the emergency department at QEH any time of the day and be
Yes.
sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. We understand the demand, and I'm sure
Yes.
it is greatly increased at this time.
It
but
is.
You
It
have
is.
given some good advice, and I really hope that people recognize that they really need to take that seriously, because that's really your foundation, and if you don't, manage that, then the problem is a different situation altogether. So
Correct.
don't be afraid to reach out and ask for help and talk to someone. You've given lots of great tips, Dr. Ford. I want to give you an opportunity for closing comments as we wrap up this session.
Okay. So remember, it's okay to not be okay. We have all been through a lot. All of us are going to deal with situations differently because we're built differently. If you are not okay, please reach out to someone, whether that is a professional or a friend, just for comfort or to vent and just for some counsel. Remember, exercise, continue to eat balanced meals as much as you can, because I know a lot of us have been eating differently because either the electricity is off, the gas is off, the water is off. So do as much as you can in terms of your eating. Take time for yourself. Take time for quiet time, reflection, meditation, yoga, prayer, devotions, anything that you can to recenter yourself when you're feeling overwhelmed. And if you cannot manage, do not hesitate to seek help.
Absolutely. Well said. Lots of great advice. We certainly appreciate you and your time. I know that you have clients that need your attention.
Yes.
So if we get to see you back for a wrap-up session for our 10 to 12 huddle, you're more than welcome. Otherwise, we certainly appreciate the time you could give us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. All right, we're going to take a quick break on my 10 to 12 as we look at, picking up the pieces and recovering, moving forward after the storm. After the break, we are going to talk about insurance, why it's so important, how it works, how it can help. Thanks for staying with us. This is my 10 to 12, the Wednesday, July 7th edition, and we are certainly focusing on this is our hurricane season. And last week, between Thursday and Friday, we would have battened down and tried to prepare ourselves for the passing of Tropical Storm Elsa, which turned into a hurricane. I think that our devastation may have been a different story if Elsa wasn't moving quite so quickly, but it still caused some damage and piqued our attention as to the deficits and certainly what we need to address looking forward to being better all around. So right now I want to bring into the conversation Mr. Anton Lovell. He is the General Manager with Cooperators General Insurance. Thank you so much for making some time to chat with us here on my 10 to 12.
Thank you, Cassandra. Good morning. Pay a small sum compared to the value of your property or the value of your contents.
Right. There are all types of insurance. So maybe we can also use this opportunity to talk about some of the types of insurance as far as property is concerned, because, you know, we want people to understand how it all works.